The Guanches were the first known inhabitants of the Canary Islands off the coast of northwestern Africa, but their true origins have long been a mystery to archaeologists. They were accomplished astronomers, and for some, their mummification rituals link them to the ancient Egyptians, whilst for others, their legends suggest they could even be surviving inhabitants of Atlantis. New scientific evidence may have found the truth about these mysterious people. Recently, archaeological excavations revealed that the inhabitants of the Canary Island traded with Rome, and new DNA evidence has shed some light on the origins of the population. The Canary Islands are an autonomous community of Spain, consisting of an archipelago in the Atlantic Ocean, southwest of the Iberian Peninsula, and 76 miles off the coast of Morocco. The 8 main islands are Tenerife, Fuerteventura, Gran Canaria, Lanzarote, La Palma, La Gomera, El Hierro, and La Graciosa. The Canary Islands are volcanic islands and are essentially the peaks of a huge volcanic mountain range, now partially submerged. The first historical record of the islands so far discovered is from the 1st century Roman writer Pliny the Younger. An expedition to the islands was apparently sent by Juba II, the Roman client king of Numidia and Mauritania, in around 30 BC. Under the Roman Catholic Republic and Empire, Numidia consisted of a part of Africa north of the Sahara, corresponding roughly to the modern western Tunisia and eastern Algeria. It was during this expedition that the islands got their name of the Canary Islands because of the multitude of large dogs found there, the Roman word canis meaning dog. After the fall of the Roman Empire, we hear nothing of the islands for hundreds of years until around 1000 AD, when the Arabs landed and traded with the inhabitants of Gran Canaria. In 1150 AD, the Arab geographer Muhammad al-Idrisi compiled the first official account of the population of the islands, which consisted of short descriptions of sailors and traders' accounts of the time. During the 15th and 16th century, Spain and Portugal began colonizing the Americas and Africa, stopping off at the Canary Islands along the way. When they arrived on the Canary Islands, they encountered a culture that resembled the Neolithic cultures of prehistoric Europe. Complete Spanish conquest of the islands was completed in 1496, and they became a vital Spanish base on sea routes to the Americas. As a result of Spanish colonization, the diseases introduced by the European conquerors and the slave trade by the native Guanches of the island chain were decimated, losing much of their culture in the process. By the 19th century, the Canary Islanders had even lost their language, as it came to be replaced by Spanish. There are still, however, some reminders of the once thriving culture of the Guanches of the Canary Islands. The Guanches. The Guanches were the first known inhabitants of the Canary Islands, the indigenous people when the Spanish arrived there in the 15th century. They lived mainly in natural caves or occasionally built low stone huts and small fortifications. The Guanches lived off farming and herding, had a diet which included milk, goat, pork and fruits, and dressed mainly in goatskin leather tunics and vests made of plaited rushes. Archaeological research suggests that they were organized in a tribal society ruled by chieftains or kings. The Guanches were not skilled sailors, and therefore the culture of each of the Canary Islands developed differently. In Tenerife, for example, the Guanche civilization was divided into 9 small kingdoms, each led by a ruling mensi. Caves were also used for grain storage and as temples, and some are still preserved today and demonstrate the sophisticated astronomical knowledge of the Guanches. The most impressive of these structures is Risco Caído, a vast cultural site covering around 18,000 hectares on the island of Gran Canaria. The archaeological site consists of 21 caves containing significant rock art believed to relate to magical or religious beliefs and fertility rituals. One of these caves has a small opening in its roof, where light enters from the summer solstice to autumn, allowed sunlight and moonlight to enter the caves and illuminate symbolic engravings on the walls. Because of this, many archaeologists think that Risco Caído could have been used by the prehistoric inhabitants as a primitive astronomical clock. Over the years, there have been a number of finds made in the Canary Islands which suggested some sort of contact with the Roman world. In 1964, a Roman amphora, storage jar, was discovered in waters off Lanzarote, and since that time other examples have been found underwater. None, however, could be securely dated. A few years ago, however, excavations on the island of Lanzarote uncovered the first securely dated evidence of Roman trade with the islands. Investigations at the prehistoric settlement of El Belvedere yielded around 100 Roman pot shards, 9 pieces of metal and 1 piece of glass. The artifacts were found in archaeological levels which indicate that they dated between the 1st and 4th centuries AD. Legends of Atlantis and Ancient Egypt. There are numerous legends surrounding the native people of the Canary Islands. Some believe they were somehow related to the Celts, or perhaps even the Vikings. Others that the Guanches were descended from the inhabitants of the mythical land of Atlantis. In this theory, Cape Verde, the Azores, Madeira and the Canary Islands would be the remains of this legendary sunken continent. A more recent theory connects the first settlers of the Canary Islands with the Berber Canary tribe. The Guanches have also been linked to ancient Egyptians, perhaps as a colony of that civilization because of their habit of mummifying their dead. It is a fact that the Guanches used similar methods to the ancient Egyptians when preserving the remains of their high-ranking citizens. After the mummification process, the bodies were buried underground or inside caves. Unfortunately, many of these mummies were stolen or looted by later grave robbers, though some have managed to survive. The Guanche mummy of Madrid is perhaps the best preserved of the Guanche mummies, as its careful embalming kept its organs intact and even preserved the man's hair. The man, who died during his early 30s, was mummified between the 11th and 13th centuries AD, just a few centuries before the Spanish invaded the Canary Islands. New DNA evidence. In June 2019, it was announced that DNA studies had resolved many of the outstanding questions regarding the origins of the Guanches. Dr. Linus Girdland-Flink, a researcher at Liverpool John Moores University in the UK, who was part of the research team, stated, "Previous studies of the Guanches relied on single genetic markers, such as the mitochondrial DNA and Y chromosomes. These markers often lack the analytical precision needed to resolve finer levels of population history. By sequencing autosomal DNA, we gained unique insights to the ancestry and origin of these populations." The researcher team generated the genome-wide sequence data and mitochondrial genomes from 11 Guanche individuals originating from archaeological sites in Gran Canaria and Tenerife. Leading author of the study, Dr. Ricardo Rodriguez Varela, a researcher at Stockholm University, explained the results of the team's fascinating study. By generating the first autosomal genetic data from these populations, we can conclusively demonstrate that the Guanches were most closely related to modern North Africans of Berber ancestry than to any other population we included for comparisons, supporting previous studies but adding more detail and nuance. The study was also able to show that the modern inhabitants of Gran Canaria inherited between 16 and 31% of their genomic ancestry from the Guanches. The Berbers spread throughout North Africa more than 3,000 years ago, occupying what is today the area from Libya to the Sahara. Rosa Friegel, a geneticist at La Laguna University, who took part in the research, said of the results, "Thanks to DNA analysis, we've been able to dispel the notion that the Guanches were practically Vikings, tall, blonde and blue-eyed. Everything indicates that they came from North Africa and were physically similar to the Berbers. White skin with a tendency to an olive complexion and brown eyes that could be light-colored in some cases." Clichés and legends notwithstanding, the ancient inhabitants of the Canary Islands were not so different from today's. But the question is, if the original inhabitants of the Canary Islands came from North Africa, how and when did they arrive? Archaeologists believe that there were two major migrations, the first around 2,500 years ago, and the second one at around the 1st century AD, when North Africa was part of the Roman Empire. They are believed to have made the crossing in relatively small vessels, although no remains of these have ever been found. In February 2020, it was announced that the mummified remains of 72 individuals had been discovered by amateur archaeologists using a drone in a cave on Gran Canaria. Aros Hima Gonzalez, who made the incredible discovery, said, "We were flying a drone and we took some pictures of the cave. It is in a very difficult place to access and you need to climb a cliff to reach the site. People thought the photos were fake because of all the bones there, but they were not fake, and the bones are believed to belong to Guanche's mummified remains." Archaeologist Veronica Alberto and culture counsellor Javier Velasca confirmed the discovery, stating that the cave dates back to between the 8th and 10th centuries AD. A few years ago, newspapers all over the world carried the story that ancient history researcher Robert Sarmast has located the lost continent of Atlantis off the Mediterranean island of Cyprus. Sonar scanning apparently revealed man-made structures in the water around the island, 1 mile beneath sea level. Sarmast believed that the Mediterranean basin was flooded in 9000 BC, which submerged a rectangular landmass which he maintains was Atlantis. Although archaeologists at the time dismissed Sarmast's claims out of hand, new evidence suggests there may indeed be an ancient city submerged in the waters around Cyprus. Almost every year without fail, the headline "Atlantis Found" blares out from various newspapers all over the world. In fact, the range of hypothetical locations for Atlantis is staggering. The Minoan civilization of late Bronze Age Crete, supposedly destroyed by a colossal earthquake on the neighboring island of Thera, modern-day Santorini, around 1450 BC, was long thought to have been an indirect influence on Plato's Atlantis. However, research into late Bronze Age Crete has shown that the Minoan civilization continued to flourish long after the Theran quake. This vast array of wildly different theories has contributed to the skepticism of many researchers, who believe that Plato's Atlantis was merely a political allegory designed to glorify Athens as the perfect state fighting against a decadent and greedy Atlantean empire. For them, the story begins and ends with Plato. Solon never visited Egypt and heard the story from the priests at Sais. They reason that Plato located Atlantis out in the Atlantic beyond the Pillars of Hercules, because in his time this vast ocean represented the limit of the world known to the Greeks. Atlantis researchers, of course, would completely disagree with this conclusion. Indeed, one of them, Iranian-American architect Robert Sarmast, believes he knows exactly where Atlantis is. Did Robert Sarmast find Atlantis off Cyprus? Sarmast first hit the headlines in November 2004 when newspapers carried the story that after nearly 10 years of research using ocean mapping technology and accounts from ancient texts, he'd located Atlantis off Cyprus. Sarmast was quoted as saying, "This is going to rewrite the history books. We are set to make the biggest archaeological discovery of all time." He claimed that around 9000 BC, the Mediterranean basin was flooded in a deluge that submerged a rectangular, man-made site which he believed was Atlantis. The lost civilization apparently lay around 5,000 feet below sea level, 50 miles or so off the southeastern coast of Cyprus. Sarmast and his team had carried out deep-water sonar scanning, which indicated man-made structures on a submerged hill, including a wall almost 3 miles long, a walled hill summit, and deep trenches. Sarmast's 6-day expedition cost about $200,000 and was partly funded by the Cypriot Tourist Organization. Sarmast was quoted at the time as saying of his discoveries, "It is a miracle we found these walls, as their location and lengths match exactly the description of the Acropolis of Atlantis provided by Plato in his writings. We cannot yet provide tangible proof in the form of bricks and mortar, as the artifacts are still buried under several meters of sediment. But the circumstantial and other evidence is irrefutable. My discovery will vindicate Plato. Within his dialogues, Plato provides factual clues as to what Atlantis was like. I have matched all but 2 of the 45 clues with the area around Cyprus. That's either the biggest coincidence in the history of the world, or we have found Plato's Atlantis. Plato's account is so detailed that it is possible to make city plans based on his description. These match exactly the antediluvian maps of Cyprus as discovered through oceanographic mapping. Sarmas had in fact revealed his discoveries the year before he hit the newspaper headlines in a book entitled Discovery of Atlantis, The Startling Case for the Island of Cyprus. At a 2004 press conference to announce his discoveries, Sarmas was challenged by Michel Morisseau, a French geologist who lives on Cyprus, to provide evidence that the Mediterranean had been flooded far more recently than the conventionally accepted 5 million years. Unfortunately, Sarmas was not able to provide any evidence whatever to back up his claims. Despo Pilides, an archaeologist at the Department of Antiquities in Cyprus, said of Sarmas' claims, "The latest theory should be taken with a very large pinch of salt. Archaeologists only work with hard evidence. There is no evidence whatsoever to give credence to this hypothesis, and we have no intention of investigating it." Commenting on Sarmas' interpretation of the sonar results, Benny Pisa, a social anthropologist at Liverpool John Moores University in the UK, criticised his far-fetched theories and unscientific approach. Selective interpretation is nothing more than the blinkered reading of very ambiguous and unconvincing images, he said. Anyone with a critical eye can pick out these images that they're far too vague and uncertain to be regarded as compelling evidence for any man-made structures. The very foundation on which the hoax is based is completely bogus. According to his theory, Mr. Sarmas claims that the Mediterranean basin was flooded in a deluge at around 9000 BC, which submerged a rectangular landmass he believes was Atlantis. The problem is, there is no evidence whatsoever for any large-scale flooding of the Mediterranean basin at that time. Not to be deterred, Sarmas organized a second expedition to the site in 2006, but results of the work were inconclusive. He returned to Cyprus in June 2011 to film a documentary in support of his Atlantis theory. He again had the backing of the Cyprus Tourism Organization, as well as the History Channel, together with a number of private investors. However, Sarmas appears to have made no further discoveries at the supposed site of Atlantis, and nothing has been heard from him on the subject since 2013. New discoveries off Cyprus. However, the theory that ancient Atlantis may lie submerged in the waters off Cyprus does not seem to be dead yet. In April 2018, Cypriot newspaper The Cyprus Traveller announced that a chance discovery by a group of tourists had led a team of marine archaeologists to the location of Atlantis, off the coast of Paphos, a coastal city in southwest Cyprus. The team, led by archaeologist Marios Astio, used luge cutting-edge sonar technology to scan the ocean bed. After further surveillance, deep ground radar and digital mapping, a team was sent to the ocean floor where they discovered an ancient statue of Aphrodite. After extensive analysis, Professor Kostas Anotos from Cyprus University's Department of Antiquities authenticated the relic and confirmed that the extraordinary find was the first artifact that categorically proved that the great and wonderful empire of Atlantis was located off the coast of Paphos. A large-scale operation to recover further artifacts and building remains was soon underway, with the Cyprus Tourism Organization also planning to put out a tender for the building of a Paphos-based Atlantis museum. Marios Astio commented on the spectacular discoveries. Over the centuries, there's been heated debate over whether Atlantis was a mythical or historical location, with hundreds of archaeologists and geologists searching for its location. In fact, the reason I became a marine archaeologist was to try to discover the true location of Atlantis. Having completed my lifetime goal, I'm looking forward to enjoying an early retirement." He added, "I was astounded when I heard that Astio and his team had discovered the location of the lost city of Atlantis, mainly because my great-grandmother always used to